actually playing out. And what they're missing is, in fact, the clues that will lead, or not the clues, but the trends that are forecasting their major downfall. And we're seeing it now. And the minute that we hit the evacuation, that the scattering of the peoples begins within the United States, it's the death of the dollar, the rise of the $600 silver into the chaos. Not a good time. So people write to me and they say, well, when will $600 silver be here? And I say, if you're lucky, never in your lifetime. But if you're unlucky, it may well be in your lifetime, and you'll rue every single day of it simply because of the chaos that such a thing represents.
Absolutely. And you can't eat silver or gold. Don't forget that.
No, and imagine the situation that will drive it to that kind of a price. It's the collapse of dollars. There won't be food supplies. There won't be easy energy supplies. There'll be virtually nothing in the way of government except for these warlords in various cities pretending to be the inheritors of it all.
Isn't that the truth? Warlords and cities.
Yeah.
Well, again, Hollywood screenwriters couldn't have come up with anything wilder than what we're facing. Okay,
I'm sure they've tried.
Oh, yes, I'm sure they have. Back in a minute, folks. Okay, and our final segment already with Clif High, halfpasthuman.com. You can get the new report there. It was just released Monday. Clif is doing this exclusive appearance on this program because he really has great respect for you, the most intelligent audience in talk radio, without question. Now, the data gap. Just got a note from Teresa, and let me read this. She says, "Hi, Jeff. My thoughts on this data gap. I think it may be a rare period where it is not written yet. We are being faced with many tests, and depending on how we karmically handle those tests, we'll see the outcome in that period. I could be wrong, of course, but I have also heard the same thing about the 2012 period from psychics for years. We create it all. That is why they have to manipulate our subconscious. Truly a fight of good and evil. Hopefully we'll make a different choice than has been made before. All of this has happened before. All of this will happen again." Anyway, just a thought. We have a lot of good thinking people out there.
Yeah, and it's quite true. I mean, on a continuous creation basis, my model of universe does allow that consciousness expresses itself in the material world directly because it creates matter. And since we're trapped in the material world in little bits of consciousness, we're obviously participating at some level. And I'm certain that if we all decided to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to go over and shoot that guy, all their wars would simply just disappear.
Right.
The problem at the moment is there's a couple of the nut jobs that wouldn't say that, and they'd push some buttons. But, I think we'll come out of it at some level.
What level that'll be. I think your tribal warlords appointed by what they call a federal bureaucracy to oversee cities under siege, cities where law enforcement goes home to take care of its own families, in many cases.
Sure.
Immediate breakdown of the thin veneer of what they call civilization, which is hanging by a thread and people just don't get it. It's that grand illusion that keeps people towing the line and following the rules.
Well, and also we have to acknowledge that civilization is an abstraction that frequently is assaulted historically.
Oh, yeah.
And in the assaults, we have negative impact in the sense of, the Dark Ages, the collapse of the Roman Empire, the collapse of the Second Chinese Empire, etc., 5th century China. These kind of things are very similar to the kind of times that we find ourselves now, only they were occurring. Well, no, we'd actually have to say that they were pretty much global at that point, too, because we were having the collapse of the Mayan civilizations concurrently with some of those. So there are indeed cycles, and we're at one of those. The aware observer, I guess, the smart individual who's educated themselves to be able to look up from their munching of the sheeple grass and say, what's going on in the distance there, can maybe see that, it's time to start charting a separate course. and that there are some things that are simply not worth preserving. Other things make sense, but the Hadrian in the Hadrian's Wall, and then standing at the gate of the defenses, so to speak, on the bridge to defend the civilization against the barbarians, is a fine and noble gesture. But the people that tell you that are the powers that be, who are slipping out the back door, while these brave and noble people are sacrificing themselves to defend, quote, civilization. So it's kind of, if you really look and educate yourself, and you get to the point where you start listening to Michael Tsarian, among others, where they describe the powers that be in excruciating detail, and you see what nasty fellows these are, you think to yourself, well, if it's good enough for the Rockefellers to go skate about at this point, or the Rothschilds, then maybe it's also good enough for me. And we note, of course, that the Rothschilds are off on Plastiki, their little plastic boat in quote, an eco tour sort of a deal, and they're all going out and about, and at this point in time, I kind of think there's a reason.
Well, they all have their land stakes in Patagonia and Argentina and Paraguay, and they have their standby planes, private jets, ready to go in case something really unfortunate happens that they can't step
Not in
aside.
case. When?
When? Well, in their mind, in case. But they're going to go, a lot of them. This is going to happen, and I'm curious about this mass relocation of people. And I'm just wondering if the government is going to try to come up with a program, FEMA, to force or entice, or both, homeowners and other people who have apartments or buildings to let these people stay there. And what we'll have immediately, though, of course, are shanty towns, absolute unbridled crime and criminality. This is going to be wild.
Yeah, and there's also the issue of whether FEMA per se would exist, because my point about the derivatives and the collapse of the dollar, the repercussions will be very rapid within the federal government, since they're so close to the printing of the money. It's kind of like on a hose. The water stops at the faucet before it stops at the end. So people will be hanging on out in the provinces thinking there's more money coming, but the people in the inner circle, so to speak, will know what's going on and start absolutely deserting these agencies, and it will ripple outward. So the source of control will leave and will be dying from the inside as the flow of funds is shrinking. So the idea that FEMA would exist in any kind of a comprehensive whole with the collapse of the dollar due to the sudden collapse of the derivatives due to the evacuation.
Yep. And just a word to the wise, if you haven't bought any storable food, you still have a little teeny window left, because come July and August, I think this thing is going to ramp up to a level of horror for many along the Gulf Coast, that they will literally just backpack it out of there if they have to. Guns and rations, and they'll start walking, a lot of them. There are a lot of ex-military people that are able to protect themselves, and they're going to be banding together. This is going to be crazy.
Well, it's also nationwide. Now, let's not forget that the impacts will also reach all the way up into Canada. If our data was accurate on one point within that temporal area, it's probably accurate in the others. We discount numbers that come through, but some numbers we trust because of the way that they come through linguistically.
Well, these people are going to want to go north. They're not going to want to stop.
Well, my point being is, so will all of the people in Central America.
Yeah.
They'll be forced to evacuate north or south as the system of winds start drawing the poisons their direction. So you'll have 50, 60 million Central Americans that will want to come up the I-5 corridor heading towards Vancouver.
Well, thank goodness the Cascades and so forth are there. Blow a few bridges and nobody moves. They all stay.
They'll probably collapse on their own, given all the other stuff we've got going on.
They all stay in Redding. We need to stop that, and it wouldn't take many National Guardsmen to take care of that, and maybe there'll be something left. Even local militias could stop it, and that may happen. It's wide open here. We're at an unprecedented level in our devolution. At this point, we're we're looking at something we've never seen before.
And it's very interesting on many different levels. And as long as you don't get too caught up into the monkey mind part of it, you recognize that, material reality is not what we are. We're not really our bodies. We're the sum total of our experiences.
Yeah, well, for the average American, that doesn't work. They can't get there. They've been brought up on media, and the media says things.
I know.
Media, okay, well, for all of you folks in the Gulf area listening, what would Clif High counsel them at this moment? We have 2 minutes left.
I'd make contingency plans for the expectation that you'll be forced out by circumstances, and I would not particularly allow myself to stay there just because government didn't tell me to move.
In other words,
if things smell bad, you're being exposed to those chemicals.